It is September 11, and I want to pause just real quick. I'm here with PJ, Jeff Deming, and Daniel Gregory. Tonight, September 11th, is my wife and I's anniversary.
Nice. Happy anniversary to you and Sherry.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
32 years
32,
ago. 32 years ago. It's
wow.
crazy. It's kind of hard to believe.
And I think last week you took a little trip to celebrate.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a little place, it's, I can't remember the name of town, but it's got this cool little Spanish style inn type thing. We like to go there. And a little trip out to Lodi area to my cousin's bakery, which is amazing. There's a little Mexican restaurant we like in Los Banos. So we kind of do the little 2 days sort of just kind of travel around. So.
You know, isn't celebrations in a pandemic a little strange?
Yeah, because you have to plan your bathroom stops. You can't just randomly go places. You can't, and it's like, hey, we're taking our food to eat in the car.
Right. Well, on another note, another anniversary we celebrate on September 11th is 19 years since the falling of the Twin Towers.
Yes.
And so that's another one that we're coming up almost on 2 decades since then as well. So
unbelievable.
So celebrate. There's great joy, and then sometimes there's different things that happen to us. I got to tell you that I've really enjoyed where we've been going the last couple of weeks. We've going through the Old Testament, and it's kind of a celebration of our heroes back then.
And the shadow they cast, which is kind of funny because it's like they cast a shadow over us, but it's a light shadow. It's like, oh, here, walk in these footprints, or something like it's hope.
Right. Yeah. I think one thing I've been also, when the story we talked about last week was Esther.
Yes.
And so I think one thing that just kind of struck me is that we're living in uncertain times.
Yeah.
And they did too.
Yeah.
And they had pandemics, or as Esther's case, almost annihilation of the entire people. That's what they were scared about. But tonight, you're taking us to a different time.
Oh, yeah.
And tell us about where we're going tonight.
Well, okay. So, we've looked at Joshua. In fact, we've spent 2 nights looking at Joshua. If you missed some of those, you got to see those, because Joshua, right? One of them, the whole point in the middle of the pre-40 years, it's like he did nothing wrong, and he had to pay this penalty, right, for 40 years. And at the end of his life, and he calls everybody together and says, "Look, this is what it's been about.
Right.
Make up your mind, right?" And so we looked at, in the case of Esther last week, they'd done nothing wrong. They it's like they're being hunted for just who they were.
Yes.
This story's a little different.
Okay.
Because this story, the people had made some bad choices.
Okay.
And God sends Elijah. And Elijah now is going to struggle. That's the fascinating thing. In all the other stories we looked at where these people did nothing wrong, and in Elijah's case, these people had willfully walked away from God. Ahab was a horrible leader, and all the things that happened in there. His wife was unbelievably bad as well, and the land was suffering, and the 3.5 years drought. Elijah calls them up, and we're going to look a little post this, right, to Mount Carmel, and they have the big showdown. The fire rains down, and it doesn't just do the sacrifice, it does the wood and the stones and the water, and the gone, right?
Yeah.
Big divot in the ground, like gone, like whoa! Right? And you think, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And Elijah should be like sailing. He runs a marathon. I mean, he's run faster than anybody else has ever recorded. He's running in front of horses. You would think, oh, living on top of the world.
I think what's so unique about this story, they're in a pandemic.
Yep.
It's a drought.
Yep.
There is unsettling the land.
Yep.
And loneliness surmounts. But there's a great hero moment where God shows up.
Yeah.
But it doesn't cast the same kind of lifting that you would expect.
You would think, right?
What happens?
The people are cheered, and he comes down, and he comes to sleep that night at the gate.
Right.
And Jezebel catches wind, because Ahab obviously was like blown away. He's like, man, you should have seen. Fire came down. It's like the water's like, she was like, so I see Baal answered the prayer for rain. It's like, no. Baal did nothing.
Right.
And they answered the prayer for rain. Jehovah showed up. Man, it was amazing. What about the prophets? Oh, they're all dead. Ooh, now she sends a message. So she sends word to Elijah, and he's just devastated. He runs out to the wilderness about a day's journey, it says, and it says, let me die, and goes to sleep. Angel wakes him up, says, you got to eat. He eats, goes to sleep. Angel wakes him up, says, you got to eat some more, and he takes off. And he takes off, what we're going to look at in chapter 18. We're going to read a couple of verses that set it up, 11 and 12, and then go to 18, and that's our heart story.
Yeah. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about in our morning chapel for our students about Eco Challenge. You remember that race from years ago, where they would travel as teams. Now he runs 26 miles or a little bit longer, and then he continues his journey.
Yeah, he goes to what they call Mount Horeb, which is the old word for Mount Sinai. He runs where the only place he knows God is sacred, or still there. So he goes all the way to Mount Sinai, and he goes to God and says, God, what are you doing? Right? I don't understand.
Well, I think what one thing is that I in our Christian walk is that Elijah has so many God moments.
Yeah, big ones.
Yeah, big ones. Taking care of him, by the brook.
He raises somebody by the brook. He raises somebody from the dead. He multiplies food. Actually, he lives off the food for the one, and that's a big Elisha one too. He hides out. Rain stops at his prayer. Rain
God makes him disappear, moves him. There's some big moments where, and I think that's the thing that sometimes we get critical of people of that up and down. Remember we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that up and down journey that you experience as a Christian, and this is the epitome of that story.
Yeah.
Because here he has all these high moments.
I mean, you can't get much higher.
Right.
I mean, you pray and God answers. You have clear indication God is listening to you and answers in such a strong way. You had such a strong faith. Bury it in water.
Right.
Don't worry, God's got it. Right? And you run, and yet now he's at the other side of that.
But the picture I like of the story, and then you're going to take us from that moment. What I like about this story is that in his desperation, in his fatigue, because he says when he's earlier in the journey, he says, I'm done.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore.
And he lays down in the bush.
You're going to bush and you're going to die. But when God revives him through the angel, says you need to eat, he runs towards God.
Yes.
The mountain of God. And that's where we find him. And take us through where he's at now.
All right. So chapter 19, verse 11 and 12. He's now at Mount Horeb. He's now at Mount Sinai. And he's like, okay, God. And God's first question is, why are you here? He says, well, I've been faithful. I've done this. I've done that. And they're just trying to kill me. God's like, okay. Verse 11. And he said, well, go outside. Stand upon the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great strong wind rent the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. I'm going to pause right there. Okay. The parallel is so, I won't say obvious, but so strong that I don't want to skip it. He goes looking for God to Sinai, just like Moses on the mount. And when God came to Moses on the mount, there was the fire that came down in Exodus. Yeah. There was the smoke. There was the earthquake that frightened the people and the cattle. And there was the lightning. There's everything exactly. And so in his mind, he's like, this is what Moses had.
This is it.
And what he didn't understand yet was that that's not how God spoke to Moses.
Yeah.
The Bible records that God spoke to Moses as a friend. And what he didn't get is like, look, you're impressed with this stuff. But that's not who I am. I can do that, but that's not who I am. And what I love is it says he goes out of the cave to face, right? And he wraps his head in a towel or some sort of clothing kind of thing to face God. And it's the same thing that Moses goes, show me your face. And it says the Lord passed by. It's the same phrase, and the Lord passed by. It's like he's given him the same thing, but Elijah still thinks that God is the fire, the thunder, the lightning, the earthquake. That's the God I want.
Yeah.
And God's like, that's not actually who I am. Now I can do that, but that's not who I am. And he speaks in a still small voice.
Yeah.
And he says, what are you doing here, Elijah? He repeats the questions like, it's just fascinating to me. It's like he gives him the same experience that he was sure that's what kept Moses going.
Right.
And what he didn't realize is, no, it was that quiet conversation.
Yeah. Relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that this story just really keeps me is it talks about in 2 Corinthians, maybe it's 1 Corinthians, but Paul talks about a struggle he had in his life. And the thorn in his flesh. And he talks about it, he says, I asked God 3 times to take this from me. And God says, basically, it's your weakness. In your weakness, I'm strong.
Yeah.
And what I like about this picture of Elijah is that Elijah, for whatever he's been through, the journey he's been on, and for the most part, he identifies it, and I think you're going to bring this out for us a little bit later after this moment, is that he identifies himself, a lot of this journey has been by himself.
Yeah.
And so what I love about this story is that God comes and gives him evidence of his presence.
Yeah.
And I think it's a powerful thing that sometimes, because you and I, often our struggles are private.
Yeah.
Are some of those moments where we feel under the broom tree, or we feel that we've run towards God's like, what are you here for?
Yeah.
And we're like, God, I'm done. I'm fatigued. I'm tired.
I can't keep doing it.
Yeah.
I can't keep doing this by myself.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? I can't keep doing this by myself. And the parting shot in verse 18 is there's 2 things that run. 18 and 19 run together. 18, God. It's like it's in my mind. White space around the black letter.
Yes.
They've had this conversation. He's just told them, go do this. Go anoint so and so. Go do this. And in my mind, he's walking. Elijah's walking away to go do it. And God's saying, "Oh, by the way, right? It's not a face. It's like God's going to get the last word. I still have 7,000 people faithful. Just so you know, when you were talking about that, earlier about being by yourself, I still got 7,000. I know what's going on. And the next scene, the next verse is he finds Elisha.
Yeah.
And puts his mantle on.
Yeah.
And now this is the first time we see Elijah's never alone anymore.
Yeah. You know what I think is so raw about these stories sometimes, and we think of them as heroes in the Bible, and they had it all put together. Coming off of this experience, anointing Elisha, we're going to talk about him, I believe, next week. We're going to go into the story. But what I love, and I'm just foreshadowing a little bit to this story, is that he gives us a mantle to him, then he realizes, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful, because he's still not restored in himself.
Yeah. I think there's still a little bit of the what's moving. He felt compelled to do it,
right?
And then he even asked him, "What have I done?"
Yeah,
it's kind of that sort of, and
So, Doug, someone out there probably tonight is feeling that same thing. How can this story? How can that be supportive to them?
It's a great question, because all of us would probably wish for, let me pray and then manna will fall, but sometimes God isn't in that. Mm-hmm. God isn't in the showy, miracle dropping, lightning, thunder. He's that still small voice.
Yeah.
And for at least for me, that's where I have to go to. It's like, okay, God, I'm not sure. And God's not asking. I think the big thing in here, God didn't ask Elijah to be by himself.
No.
I think God, Elijah put himself by himself, but I think God said, I've got 7,000 other people you don't know about.
Yeah.
And that's not because I'm hiding them from you, it's because you've been trying to do this by yourself.
Well, I think that's the fallacy that the story epitomizes. And for us, we think it's brave to live in quiet pain. Mm-hmm. And it's not, and so, wow.
I think the encouragement is find somebody, reach out, start conversations with people that, one of the, for me at least, this our time together is a big anchor stone in my life, and there's other people that I can have conversations with on certain things, and those are touchstones. Those are things that keep it anchored and solid.
Yes.
And if you don't have somebody like that, you got to ask, reach out. It can be scary, it can be terrifying. You feel like you're all alone, but that I think is the encouragement in the story. Joshua had Caleb.
Yes.
Right? Esther had Mordecai.
Yep.
Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah had each other.
Right.
And I don't think God is calling us to go it alone. He's calling us to find people that we can walk with.
Yeah.
That I think is the point. So the encouragement out of this is that God's not asking you to bear this alone.
Right.
And if you're in a place where you're all by yourself, He will never leave nor forsake you. That's His promise. But He's also saying there's people around you. I know people around you And you will find comfort in that, right?
Amen. Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Hey, awesome. Next week, Elisha.
Yes.
And the week after that, Jeremiah. And we'll cap with Jeremiah on the part of this series from Heroes of the Old Testament. Because there's something super cool going to happen in Elisha and in Jeremiah that is just, again, lessons for us today. So, next couple of weeks. All right. We'll see you guys. Thank you for joining us. Again, Gregory at MontereyBayAcademy.org or PJ Principal at MontereyBayAcademy.org. We'll see you. Have a great rest of your Sabbath.
Bye.